I had to go for it and pray the gods were smiling on me. I picked up the dice and threw 2 6s. Caldecott couldn't believe it. My go again. Another 2 6s.
Rimmer, what's wrong with you? Don't you realise that no one is even slightly interested in anything you're saying? You've got this major psychological defect which blinds to the fact that you're boring people to death. How come you can't sense that?
Sometimes when I talk about role-playing games, it sounds a little bit like that. This is the Awkward GM Corbin, and today we are going to be covering Red Dwarf, the role-playing game. And no, this isn't a game about being drunken dwarfs. The Red Dwarf RPG came out in 2002, but it's out of print. You might be able to find a digital copy somewhere, but DriveThruRPG doesn't have it. The game is based on the hit sci-fi British comedy of the same name, beloved by celebrities like Patrick Stewart and Stephen Hawking. The show is set 3 million years into the future on the mining ship Red Dwarf, where a janitor is released from stasis only to find out they are the last human alive in the universe. Their only companions are a senile AI, a hologram of his dead bunkmate, a life form that evolved from his pet cat, and an eccentric android. The setting has no aliens, instead relying on robots and genetically engineered life forms, also known as Gelfs. The game itself uses 2 6-sided dice and is pretty lighthearted for a game. It focuses mostly on comedy, and it's very similar to the Paranoia game if you're familiar with that.
Howdy doodly doo! Check out Warlock Sanctum games in the description below. Professional GMs for hire.
The rules are simple. You roll 2 dice and want to roll under the relevant stat plus skill. So if you're firing a gun, you want to roll under the combined total of your dexterity and firearms. Note, if you are penalized at all, it lowers the target number you need to roll under, not the die result. Sometimes, if you have multiple people rolling against each other, you will have to compare the margin of success each player beat their target number by. So if you rolled a 3 and your target number was 5, you subtract 5 by 3 and you get a margin of 2. And if your opponent's margin was 1, you win, but if it was 3 or more, they win. Damage is calculated by the margin of success multiplied by the weapon's rating, plus strength if you're using a melee weapon. When a weapon does damage to someone, instead of doing like hit point damage, you check to see if the damage exceeds your shrug score. If it does, you take a wound. Every wound after the first causes your character to have wound penalties, until you get to the 7th wound, in which case your character dies. Character creation is a point-based system where you distribute points across your stats and skills. You can take assets, which are special abilities, but you have to balance them out with drawbacks such as liabilities and behavior tags. I won't go over all of them, but you can get a gist of the idea with the Dumb Luck ability, which allows you to increase your target number by a d6 to be more likely to succeed. And the Smeghead behavior tag, which gives you a -3 to all social skill checks because you are an obnoxious moron. You also get to pick your character type and gear. Here we have your standard human characters. They get a few bonuses, but not much. Holograms are holographic projections of people. Usually they can't touch things unless they have a hard light drive. It also means they are hard to hit in combat, but they can't usually attack back unless they have special gear. Cats are the evolved form of domesticated cats, and they are just as vain and narcissistic. Dogs are the evolved form of domestic dogs, but they aren't well groomed and smell awful most of the time. The 4000 series of mechanoids are service droids meant to cook and clean, but some have broken their programming to be more human-like. The Hudson 10 series are updated versions of the 4000 series, but they were mailed out into space to replace the older models. Often they go mad from prolonged isolation because of this. Kinetawawi were genetically engineered life forms, also known as Gelfs, designed for labor and are the most common Gelfs in the series. They are known for being traders and pirates. Pleasure Gelfs were designed to be the perfect companion to anyone, but as such, their true forms are that of a giant pile of green goo with a single eye stalk. Talking to one with multiple people in the room can be difficult, as each person will only hear the response they want to hear. Wax droids are droids that pretend to be famous people from history or fiction. They were used on entertainment worlds, but some have learned to break their programming. Because they are made of wax, they can easily be melted down and reshaped into different forms. Simulants were warrior robots created for a war that never took place. Simulants hate humans and humanoid lifeforms, though they can be reprogrammed to be less hostile, though they may still be surly towards humans. It's at this point I'd like to mention the elephant in the room in regards to the depictions of the next few character types. I've referred to this as 90s racism, where around the 90s and a bit after, a lot of shows tended to use stereotypes for humor, usually in the form of a person with a crazy over-the-top accent like some of the monsters in the original Power Rangers shows.
Need a new customers.
We're here to toss your salad.
Well then, how about a little fire and brimstone? Orders!
Red Dwarf isn't always a politically correct show, and as such, this book went out of its way to even put in a disclaimer about depictions of drugs, sex, and alcohol. That being said, I don't really think the depictions of the following character types fit with the Red Dwarf's philosophy, as cats and dogs were never really depicted as stereotypical real-world races. Cats have run the spectrum of black and white, all having the trait of just being vain, but iguanas in this book are depicted as Jamaicans as opposed to just stoners. And rabbits are depicted like Nazis, and the rats are depicted as Italian mobsters. All these character types only appear in this book and not in the show, so make of that what you will. Rabbits reside in a universe where a derelict spaceship became overrun with rabbits due to their high birth rate, causing the rabbits to evolve into a fascist regime that domesticated humans instead. Rats and mice evolved on a spaceship as well, but with the rats becoming gangsters and mice becoming more working class. Both are attracted to shiny objects to adorn their nests. Iguanas have bulging eyes and don't tend to be fazed when surprised. Because they are cold-blooded, they can be a bit sluggish in colder climates. In the GM screen, there is a supplement that adds 2 new character types. The Vindiluvians were fake Gelfs originally used as a trick by the crew. In this book, they are a real Cyclops-like creature that despise humans. The 3000 series of mechanoids look realistically like humans, but usually have broken their programming and erased their memories so that they think they are actually human. The reason the 3000 series looks more human than the 4000 series is because people didn't like having mechanoids look like people, so they downgraded the appearance. Sometimes you'll have to roll a fear check. In that case, you have to roll your resist stat plus the fear factor of the monster, with 0 being the most scary monster you've ever seen. If you fail, you have to roll on the fear table, which I've displayed here, or if you critically fail, you have to roll on the Space Madness table. This is the Space Madness table, and it has a lot of different madness effects, similar to Call of Cthulhu, actually. But a lot of these are more for comedic effect, and it's not trying to take any serious stance on any mental health issues, which can be a little bit distracting and problematic for something, say, like shell shock, which normally is PTSD and very stressful. There's other stuff like, oh, you get the addiction of smoking or alcoholism, which aren't really something I would consider being played for laughs, but something like melancholy, where you have to write a sad love song to the GM, is kind of funny in its own way. Honestly, you don't have to use this table, and I could recommend trying to make your own homebrew version of it that is more in line with the sensibilities of the modern era and not the sensibilities of the 1990s or early 2000s. Again, this game is trying to take something that is bad and turning it into dark comedy, so take with that what you will. Watch the show, it's fun, and if you don't watch it, you're going to miss out on what this setting has to offer. I suggest starting with the premise that your players are marooned on a ship trying to get back to Earth, and go from there. The players aren't heroes, and they should be ill-equipped for the adventuring lifestyle that is now thrust upon them. There is a one-shot in the book for playing 9 holes of Gelf Golf, which is kind of like a fun death game, sort of like Squid Games. Remember that your players should be rewarded about 10 character points per session, and fear checks should be rolled as your players are ill-equipped and scared of these monsters that they're fighting. This is a light system with not a lot of mechanics. Don't worry about trying to be serious. Your players may find themselves in a parallel universe filled with teddy bear cannibals, or find themselves on a planet similar to the Wild West, except everyone's a Gelf. A lot of how I ran Red Dwarf around 15 years ago was I really wanted to delve into sci-fi concepts and flip them on their head. A lot of the time it was me just repeating some plot lines from the TV show, but I do like the idea of taking something that seems like a very serious sci-fi concept and making it comedic. Again, with player characters, you're focusing mostly on the personality of the character. You're not really looking for character backstory, though you can put that in if you want. I mean, a main character in Red Dwarf was Dave Lister, who not only wanted to get back to Earth, but he wanted to reconcile with his crush Chrissy, and he never really got to do that when he was around, and now that she's dead because 3 million years have passed, he has to find ways to go back in time or find parallel universes in order to reconcile with her. Highly suggest running this game as a one-shot or a very short campaign. It's not really meant to be a long-term thing. A lot of the monsters in the book are just characters from the TV show, and they're not really meant to be fought in a traditional like D&D, oh, as you fight you're going to go against harder and harder monsters. It's really sort of like a Call of Cthulhu thing where you might want to just not have character stat blocks and just roll dice to have fun. And that's the whole point of this game, is to have fun over being serious. It's comedic. Don't let your players feel like they need to be stressing out about whether or not they're optimizing their character correctly. You're not going to be optimized. You're going to be probably sitting curled in a corner crying for your mommy because a giant mutant monster corpse fell through your hologram character or something. That being said, this isn't a system to torture your players with. It's a system for your players to have fun and do kooky things. It's not a system where your player has to be reconciling the personal horror within their life or the horror that surrounds them that is eldritch and unthinkable by the human mind. Also, it has my favorite fake curse word from any sci-fi show, which is smeg or smeghead or smeg. These are quite rare to find nowadays, but you're going to have to find the AI screen if you want to have a DM screen in front of you, or you're going to have to find the role-playing game series source book, which I've never actually seen in person, but I've heard is essentially a collection of missions based on TV show episodes from Red Dwarf. As far as actual plays go, the only one I've been able to find is the actual play Wake Up Call by the Racontier Society. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. If you really like this video, please consider tipping me on Ko-fi in the description below. You can do it through PayPal. Also, you might have noticed I had the Red Dwarf role-playing game book in the background over here. That's because when I was a kid, I really liked Red Dwarf, and before I even knew what Dungeons & Dragons was or had it or whatever, I thought, oh, the Red Dwarf role-playing game. This sounds like it would be a cool video game. But it wasn't a video game, it was a role-playing game book. So when I got that, I delved into it, tried to play it with my friends. When they figured out it was basically Dungeons & Dragons, we stopped playing. And it wasn't until I got into college that my good friend Nora and I were talking, and we mentioned how we both liked Red Dwarf, and I said, hey, there's a Red Dwarf role-playing game, let's check it out. And she said, yeah, let's do it, and we both co-GM'd it. It was fun. It was the first time I ever really played a tabletop role-playing game, and it hit all the buttons. It got me where I am today, and I think I'm very fortunate to have a non-D&D game be my first role-playing game experience. If you have a role-playing game experience that your first role-playing game that wasn't Dungeons & Dragons, please leave it in the description below. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for getting to the end of this video. And as a treat, I am going to give you this video right here, which is going to be a sci-fi role-playing game that I kind of liked. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.